An inequality is similar to an equation, but contains symbols of less than or greater than, less than or equal to, and greater than or equal to. The solutions for inequalities will be shaded graphs. These graphs represent all the points that make the inequality or inequalities true. The 4 steps to solve inequalities are given below. Step 1 is to solve for y. If you divide or multiply by -1, remember that the sign must be changed. Step 2 is to graph the inequality. Step 3 says we use a solid line if the inequality symbol has an equals to, and we use a dashed line if the inequality symbol does not have an equals to. And then finally, step 4, if we have a greater than sign, we will shade above the line. If we have a less than sign, we will shade below the line. Now let's take a look at a few examples. The first example is y minus x is greater than 4. Step number 1 is to solve for y. So we need to add x to both sides. Y is greater than x plus 4. Looking at our sign here, we need to use a dashed line, and we need to shade above the line. So we'll enter in this equation in our calculator, the x plus 4. So press a y equals key, type x plus 4. I'll use a standard window, zoom number 6, and there's a look at the line. Okay, now remember that we need to use a dashed line. It looks like it crosses the x-axis at -4 and the y-axis at +4. I'll use that as a guide. So there is our dashed line, and we need to shade above. So this means that all the points in the shaded area will make this inequality true. Now I'm going to test and make sure that our solution is correct. I'll choose any point in the shaded area. I'll choose a point 0, 7. This means that x equals 0 and y equals 7. So I'll plug these two numbers into the original inequality and make sure it's true. So the original inequality was y minus x greater than 4. I'll plug in the numbers for my test point, 7 and 0. And you see that this inequality is true. Therefore, this point is valid as an answer to the inequality, as are the other points in the highlighted area. Now let's work another problem. The next problem is 2x minus 8y greater than or equal to 5. Step 1 is solve for y. Subtract 2x from both sides. Negative 8y is greater than or equal to negative 2x plus 5. And then divide by negative 8. I'm going to divide each term by negative 8. Now remember, when we divide by a negative number, we have to change our sign. So it gets flipped around, and now it is a less than or equal to sign. Negative 2 divided by negative 8 here will give us 1/4. And then 5 divided by negative 8 is negative 5/8. Okay, now I'm going to enter this side in the calculator. Let's take a look at the symbol. A less than or equal to sign means that we need to use a solid line, and we'll have to shade below. So first, enter this in the calculator. Y equals 1/4 x minus 5/8. Then hit graph. Now we're going to use a solid line and we're going to shade below. Here's an estimate of where the line was on the calculator. And now we'll shade below this line. Again, every point in the shaded area will make the inequality true. Our next equality is x greater than 2. Now notice that this inequality does not have a y. So we need to think about x at the value 2. So looking at the x-axis, the value 2 is right here. Now since our sign is a greater than sign with no equals, we need to use a dashed line. And we'll put a dashed line at the value 2. Now in order to shade the graph, we need to think about x values being greater than 2. The x values that are greater than 2 are over to the right side of this dashed line. So that is a portion that we'll shade. So for this inequality, all x values greater than 2 will make this true. Now we'll take a look at one more problem. In this problem, we have a system of inequalities. Notice that we have 2. So what we'll do here is take each inequality and solve for y. On the first inequality, we'll add x to both sides. And then divide by 2. Now for this inequality, we need to use a solid line, and we will shade above. Now we'll solve the second inequality for y. Subtract 4x. Y is less than negative 4x plus 6. We'll graph this in our calculator. Here we'll need to use a dashed line, and we'll have to shade below. So we'll go and type these in our calculator. Hit the y equals key first, and I'll type in the first equation, x divided by 2 plus 3 divided by 2. And then I'll type in the second equation, negative 4x plus 6. Okay, now before we were shading by hand. Let me show you a shortcut to shade in the calculator. You'll need to move your cursor in front of the y1 and y2 variables. Now on the first equation, we need to shade above the line. Now notice that my cursor is flashing right in front of y1. If I press enter, we have some different settings. I pressed enter 2 times to get a little triangle here, and this triangle means it will shade above the line. Now I'll press down, and I'll tell the calculator to shade this other equation below. Notice where my cursor is. I'm going to press enter, and press enter again, and one more time. Now this triangle means that we're shading below the line. Now I'm going to hit graph next, and you'll see how the calculator shades. Alright, so we have this graph. Now since we have 2 equations entered in, then we'll have an area where they overlap, this darkest area on the left, and these contain the points that make both inequalities true. So this is the only portion that will shade in our final answer. Now our first line was a solid line, and our other line is a dashed line, and then shade the overlapping area. Now where two inequalities cross, we have what's called a vertex. This is a point of intersection. We can find this in our calculator. To find the point of intersection, press second, calculate. Choose command number 5, intersect. Now the calculator asked what is the first curve or first line. Where the cursor is already flashing on the first line that we entered, so I'll press enter. Now notice that the cursor moved to the other line that we entered. I'll press enter again. And then you have to guess where the intersection is. I move the cursor down to where these lines crossed and press enter again. So the intersection or vertex is at the point 1, 2.